Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Double Feature podcast, where every week me and David bring two films together on our quest to marathon some great flicks, kill a long weekend, and relax with some good movies. And we invite you along as we break these movies down at the Double Feature Picture Show. David, how are you doing?
Oh, I'm feeling quite out of this world, Dean, as we continue along in this crazy, imaginative, action-packed sci-fi month that we are facing. I don't know whether to laugh or cry or jump out of my seat with all of the lovely space opera that we have experienced this week.
I mean, we did have a very interesting run up until this point, right? Because I guess for those who aren't aware, we're doing our sci-fi themed month, Sci-Fi July, and we've gone through Contact and Arrival as our first week. That was Alien Contact movies. We did Predator and Aliens, which is our action sci-fi stuff. And now we're getting into the franchise sci-fi stuff. And that's probably the majority of what this conversation is going to be about, is talking about the franchises that these media empires kind of created. But David, what are we going to be talking about this week?
Yeah, this week we're talking about two of the biggest franchises that have ever existed in sci-fi territory, let alone movie territory, that to say, because the kind of interesting thing is that Alien and Predator both kind of became their own little franchises, albeit not quite as astronomically popular, excuse my pun.
Not nearly as close as what we're talking about today.
Yeah, not even a speck of dust closer. We're going to be talking about, of course, Star Wars and Star Trek, the time-tested rivalry, but specifically we're going over the sequels to the originals.
Well, what we're going over is the movies that are considered the best of the respective franchises. The top tier, the S tier, Force Awakens and Quest for Hope. We ain't talking about those fuckers, okay?
Yeah.
We're talking about Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, and Star Wars. Okay, is it Star Wars 2 or are we talking Star Wars 5? Because there's a weird continuity thing going on.
After
or we just call it Empire.
I think that was more important when there were only 6. Now that there's 9 and a handful of other spin-offs, I think we always just go back to what the title, the subtitles are. So I always call this Empire Strikes Back.
Okay, so we're talking Wrath of Khan and Empire Strikes Back.
Yes.
Okay, so do you want to start with the franchise hot takes, or do you want to save those for later?
Franchise hot takes, actually, because I want to know what you mean by this so that I can add to it, because I think I do have some hot takes.
Okay, I'm gonna talk against Star Wars real quick, because I'm the Star Trek representative in this grouping. I'm just saying this: Star Wars, I feel every new Star Wars movie that has come out diminishes the Star Wars franchise as a whole, or at least the original trilogy, because the new Disney sequels only make it so the Star Wars original trilogy looks like so much worse as the series goes on, and the spin-offs make the original's continuity way more confusing. Am I wrong? Is Disney ruining Star Wars?
I can agree with this, that the more content that is officially made canon in the movies, because, there was a good stretch of years in which comic books and novels and things added to the Star Wars canon, but was since wiped away, quite tragically. And if you really want to dive into it, all of those also added to how confusing the Star Wars canon was. They introduced things far beyond what these movies are. But I do agree with this, that Disney seems fickle with how they want to address the tone and content of the canon. So I've always felt like while they try what they attempt to do in my mind is try and market each movie for a different audience instead of remembering like, oh, we're still dealing with a whole piece of IP here that needs to, like, Marvel handles itself better even though it's part of the same parent company, and it's just kind of criminal that way because it should be handled about the same way. But I don't know, that's a whole different argument. But yeah, I roundabouts agree that by and large every new movie they're putting out is kind of making things a little bit more of a chore.
I mean, we can agree the last two mainline Star Wars films were not exactly pinnacles of the series. Are they arguably worse than Phantom Menace? Is, I guess, the real question.
I would argue they're some of the worst movies I've ever seen. Listen, I'm a stark critic of those last two. I really, it's not even because of Star Wars. It's just like because of movies in general and how I feel about them. I don't like them, and it kind of comes down to really a lot of technical crap that I have a problem with. Because it's like those movies also have things in them that, like, just like how everybody hates on Phantom Menace, but we get pod racing out of it, which is one of the single coolest things that's ever happened in the Star Wars universe. We also get certain things like the ship crashing through another ship in the second of the new trilogy, which is one of the coolest shots in all of Star Wars. So it's a give and take, but yeah, I hate those last two.
All right. Well, that was my Star Wars hot take, where the series just gets worse the more they add to the canon, or the film content. What's your Star Trek hot take, since you're the Star Wars guy?
Yeah, and again, I'm not a Star Wars or Star Trek guy. I'm going to be candid here. This is the first Star Trek movie I've seen full and through. My dad had a couple VHSs of them when I was a kid, but how can you at all pick that from the shelf when you also have things like, Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back, and A New Hope as well? Really, I think the thing I come back to after watching this movie is no wonder people got beat up for liking Star Trek.
Wow.
Because I told this to Dean before we started a little bit. I think it was just a really slow, I don't want to say methodical, but like there's a lot of talking going on to the point where it's like, okay, I get it. This is supposed to be a little bit more science oriented, like thought experiment kind of sci-fi. Like, I get that. It's not supposed to be magic and wizards in space like Star Wars, which is cool, but it's like it doesn't necessarily test the mind, if you will.
Yeah.
But I think there's a part of me that's just like, I don't really give a shit about all the hoopla of this other crap if the action at the end of the day isn't that good. And I will say this, the hot take, I think Captain Kirk's one of the worst sci-fi protagonists ever.
What? What fuck?
I don't care about Captain Kirk or Admiral Kirk or whatever, Commander, whatever he is right now. Admiral, I think.
He's an admiral in Wrath of Khan, sir.
Yeah, excuse me. But yeah, I just like. Okay, so there's a specific moment in the movie, and I'll talk about this more at length later. But this is the exact moment where I was like, "Oh, I really don't give a shit about him anymore." There's that running thing between whatever her name, Kirstie Alley plays. And him, where she's trying to figure out how at the beginning he passed the unwinnable situation test in the simulation, and it just
the Kobayashi Maru.
Yeah,
one of the most famous things in Star Trek. Yes,
it's just revealed later that he cheated, and I'm like, what? That doesn't actually. That makes the whole point of that plot point or a character moment like obsolete in my mind. Like, I just like,
what?
He cheats, and that's how he beats the test. That's
one of the best character moments for him in the series, because why does he cheat? He believes in there is no such thing as the no-win scenario, because that's what the Kobayashi Maru is designed for, is to make a captain understand that sometimes death is at hand and there's nothing you can do about it, so you can accept the end of your reign. Like, you will die doing this and you have to be ready to accept that. And Kirk is like, no, there's always an out. There's no such thing as giving up. I will push through. There's no such thing as the no-win scenario. That is one of the best character moments in the series, sir.
Yeah, but
I am offended.
okay, look at this from my like a kind of objective, I've never seen a Star Trek movie before standpoint, right?
Mm-hmm.
What he basically copped to was, yeah, you know that test that we all take that proves our willingness to die in the line of action? I didn't actually take the test because I cheated on the test. Because it's not the original test anymore.
He took the test and failed it like twice, and then he was like, no. The only reason I'm failing it is because you guys just don't understand. The whole Kobayashi Maru thing is kind of the crux of the movie. But okay, I do. All right, I will give you this, that in context, with the rest of the series, it's really cool. In context, in that specific moment, in a logical sense, it makes no fucking sense.
Yeah.
Like, he should not have gotten out of Flight Academy in that thing. But
exactly. And it's on top of the fact, too, that I just am not a fan of how many old men are in this movie. But that's also another thing for a separate conversation. We'll get into it. We're
gonna get into it because that's like the point of the movie, but whatever. So yeah, I guess now the little other thing, I guess that's gonna be a big talking point is these are arguably the two largest science fiction franchises in history.
Right.
I can't think of anything else that's probably up here at this level. Maybe Marvel, if you count that as science fiction. Maybe.
Yeah, it's probably like a subgenre of it, but I think you could probably. I mean, there's a guy in a metal robot suit, so I guess he would have to. But
yeah, but let's be honest. It's like, Star Trek is probably. It's like Star Trek, Star Wars, and Doctor Who are the three big cornerstones of super nerddom sci-fi, right?
Probably, yeah. Like, aside from, well, yeah, I guess if you're talking sci-fi, yeah.
All right. So I guess my thing I'm gonna pose to you is why are these the ones that just have lasted so long? Why are these the ones that everybody's like, this is where we're going here?
I got 2 words. World building. That's pretty much it.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. What makes these 2 franchises commercialized? You're able to buy the action figures and the sets and the merchandise based on the world that these characters exist in. And thus they become marketable
juggernauts.
A-bombs.
Yeah. I mean, granted, Star Trek started as a pretty cheaply made TV show in the 60s.
Yeah.
And Star Wars was basically like a movie that no studio on the planet thought was going to make a lick of money.
Yeah.
And they just kind of kept on keeping on. And it's kind of fascinating because I don't know because I will say this. The Star Trek fandom, though really old and kind of gatekeepy, is not nearly as toxic as Star Wars.
Yeah.
Hot take.
I would agree with that. Like, nowadays especially, the Star Wars community is it's terrible in my mind. Like, I like Star Wars. I wouldn't go out and say like I'm a Star Wars like fan or anything, because I feel like it comes back to your point where it's so even further gatekeepy than the Star Trek shit, or beyond that, you have to be so embedded in it, like really deep into it with all the merchandise and the Funko Pops and everything to like seem like a Star Wars fan, when you can't really just like, you can't just be like, oh, I've seen all the Star Wars movies and I know a lot about it, but you wouldn't see me in public wearing a Jedi cloak like some of these weirdos.
You're not spending $300 on your officially licensed Star Wars lightsaber you made at Disneyland?
Yeah, or, it's kind of funny you mentioned Disneyland too, because I live right next to that epicenter, which is, again, like we say, it's kind of divulged into 2 branches. You're either the fully commercialized, like, Star Wars is for families, we go to Star Wars Land and buy the blue drink and all this crap, or you're the people a part of like the 501st special fan club that goes to the Disney convention every year in full clad clone trooper uniforms that they've homemade themselves that look exactly like the movie replicas. And there's so many other sub camps, like the Disney gangs that have like the black vests and the patches that are all Star Wars themed, and it just gets so, it makes you wonder. But that's what it's designed to do, I guess.
I mean, in the Star Trek fandom, it is, don't get me wrong, it's gatekeepy as fuck, because a lot of times it's like, oh, you're a Star Trek fan? Have you seen all 7 of the television series that have come out, including Enterprise and the animated series? And I'm like, bruh, like I watched a lot of TNG and I watched all the original series. That's all I got. You're not a real Star Trek fan. Calm the fuck down. You're casual. Or it's like, have you seen all the movies? I'm like, I've seen the ones like the first 5. I haven't seen the other like 17. Not a real Star Trek fan. You're a casual. Yeah. There's a lot of that in that community, but no one's like uber like there's never been a thing where you get that vitriol like hate, bordering on hate speech about certain movies or characters in the movies, unlike some of the Disney films. I was just saying.
Oh yeah, like it's been a huge controversy as of late that like with some of the recent releases, that people who are really, in my mind, they're just given bad parts is all it is, are then like made out to seem like it's their fault that terrible things happen in the movie, when it's all the creative choices that went into those parts that are really the problem. And you got to feel for those people, man. That's tough. I you know, especially when, think about it, the peak of your career has to be acting in a Star Wars movie, and then all of a sudden people just think you're a public enemy #1 because you were given a certain line to read or something.
Yeah. That's probably the biggest sin of probably both of these franchises as they've gone on, is because the new J.J. Abrams Star Trek films, those have kind of a big divide in like the Star Trek fandom, because yeah, you know, the whole thing where like the other two, like the last 2 of the Star Trek like trilogy, that the more recent ones, the 2000s ones, those ones were not well received at all. Grant, it just wasn't as big because Star Trek in general is a much more quiet or smaller fan base than the Star Wars fandom.
Yeah, it's not so forward facing, I think.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things, people are still ashamed to call themselves Star Trek fans, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it is interesting as both these series have gone on, as if Star Trek has to like make more movies, they don't want J.J. Abrams, and if Star Wars has to make more movies, they don't want J.J. Abrams. He is ruining our sci-fi. Don't give him Doctor Who, please.
I don't think he would touch that with a 10-foot pole anyway. There's not really much room to get lens flares out of a phone booth, if you know what I mean. But he would probably find a way. Well, let's why don't we start getting into the thick of things here? There's a lot to discuss when it comes to both of these movies.
Yes, indeed.
Oh, I guess it's log lines first, eh? That's where we are right now.
Yes, sir. Why don't you give us the log lines for these 2 pretty good films today?
All right. The log lines for this week: Empire Strikes Back is about the rebel fleet that retreats from their hidden headquarters as a lone Jedi amongst the ranks must find a lost Jedi master to harness the power that will keep the Galactic Empire at bay. Wrath of Khan is about an aging admiral that must rejoin his crew to stop a long-forgotten nemesis from taking hold of a technology that, when in the wrong hands, will destroy rather than create life.
All right. So where did you start?
I did Empire Strikes Back first. Again, a good old Star Wars movie can always be a great comfort, and it was again this time. As I think I even fell asleep in like the 3/5 to 4/5 of the film. You know, that kind of section where Luke goes to Alderaan, and I still remember everything that happened.
Oh, okay. You're proving my point that I might have mentioned earlier, but whatever.
No, I'm saying I've seen the movie that much to where I know exactly what happened. And don't get me wrong, I'd love it. Listen, okay. Dean and I are going to get into a episode-long argument right now about which movie has less going on in it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm of the firm opinion that Empire Strikes Back is an action-packed, high-intensity movie, whereas Dean seems to think that old men talking in corridors is just as action-packed.
Whoa. I'm saying Star Trek The Wrath of Khan has far more like thematic underscore pinnings of the entire... That movie is Shakespearean in its analysis of revenge, of growing old, of... There's so much going on underneath the surface of Wrath of Khan. In Empire, I could have slept through the first 45 minutes and still know what's going on. You don't need like half that fucking movie to know what's happening.
Listen,
You admitted you slept through like 20 minutes of it and you still got it.
all I'm going to say is that Ricardo Montalban was more menacing in The Naked Gun than he ever was in Wrath of Khan.
Ricardo Montalban is a treasure, sir.
Oh,
I
love him in The Naked Gun, or let alone his probably bigger masterpiece in The Wrath of Khan, Spy Kids 3D.
Bruh, come. Billy D. Williams only shows up as Lando Calrissian in Empire, so like Star Wars can say there's at least one black guy in the universe. All right,
but he's the coolest black guy in the galaxy, Dean. He exudes.
I mean, he is. Every time he struts in the room, his dick enters 10 minutes before he does. All right,
exactly.
But all I'm saying is Cloud City served almost no purpose other than for Han to get caught.
Which is fine. It's another world for us to visit. This is okay. So this is a kind of like a thing, right, in Star Wars, and this is, I guess, where we'll start with it. Star Wars. Every Star Wars movie you go to a new place. In this one, we get Hoth, we get Dagobah, we get Alderaan. Or no, not Alderaan. Bespin. That I think is what it is.
Yeah, Cloud City's on Bespin, I believe.
I think I spoke earlier about that. I'm very particular about my Star Wars worlds, although I could not name a single one from the new franchise. But all that aside, I feel like it's just a matter of we get these different views on society that kind of, in a way, in my opinion, has something to do thematically with where the characters are in the movie. At the beginning, the Rebel Alliance is in a desperate state of hiding, and where else would they do that but on a desolate desert of sorts, like we started in the previous movie, Hoth, which is an inhospitable place in which they can conceivably not be found. Where else can you go to not be found? A world in which, overrun with alien-like tropical life forms, one tiny Jedi Master can hide away from the rest of the universe. Dagobah, where then we must go to find all the secrets of the Force, especially because in a lot of stories, the Force has a lot to do with secrets and magic. Then we go to Bespin, or Cloud City, which is just as desolate as the other places, but we have found a way to find society there. Of course, that society is still teeming with secrets and deceit.
Bruh, I don't know if you can smell your own farts right now, but I think you're smelling your own farts right now. Okay. I will say that that Empire, it's really cool. They travel all these different places. There's all these cool things going on. But there's some things where it's like, why is this in the movie? Why did Han and Leia go into the giant worm mouth on the asteroid?
It's second act, bro. You got to do something.
Why is it in there? We needed to fill up like 10 minutes of screen time. Fuck it.
Why did Khan, for example, choose the most boring way to mind control two people in putting worms in their ears?
What?
It's
you mean
the
where
most.
He infects them with a mind controlling worm alien creature that's the last surviving thing on this planet.
Oh my god, it was the slowest scene in cinema existence, bro.
That same thing. The reason Kirk stranded him on this planet, and the thing that was on that planet led to the death of his wife that spawns his quest for revenge.
First of all, he already has plenty of reason to get revenge. We didn't need to know his wife dies, and we don't even see her die. So it's just a mention in dialogue, of which we already had 9 minutes of it before the climax to this exhilarating scene is the slowest moving silk inchworm inching into somebody's mind, and then for some reason just being able to make it so that you're mind controlled.
Wait. Are you saying that Star Trek doesn't make sense? Okay, is the
Force
magic or is it metachlorians?
No, it's magic. That's all it is.
It's magic.
Listen,
it's magic.
But you could just as well as you could say magic is measurable by metachlorians. In real life, technically, magic is measurable by things like aura and crystals and all this crap that I don't know what tarot card bullshit people believe in nowadays. But there are ways to measure magic. But at least the excuse is magic, not worms control my mind.
No, in Star Wars canon, it's not magic, it's metachlorians.
It's magic.
I will go back to the Phantom Menace to ruin your Star Wars, because my argument is more Star Wars makes the original trilogy worse.
Well, we agreed on that on the outset. But
yeah,
at this point in the Star Wars universe, it's magic, even though technically it would be after that point in which we realized it's not magic. So we don't need to go there.
Gotcha. Okay, you know what? We should give a little bit of context to Empire Strikes Back, because this was only the second of the Star Wars canon, right?
Yeah.
There was Star Wars, and then there was Empire. And okay, the year that this came out, I'll give a little bit of prefix here. So this movie comes out in 1980. The original Star Wars, I believe, came out in 77?
77, yes.
Yeah. So, comes out in 77. It makes all the fucking money. Empire comes out 3 years later. Everybody wants to see this. It makes so much money that, okay. Dolly Parton's film 9 to 5 was number 2 at the box office. It made $118 million.
Lovely.
Empire Strikes Back made $240 million. It lapped the number 2 at the box office. It made that much fucking money.
Yes.
People were clamoring for this. And it comes out, and immediately it's declared the best Star Wars film.
Mm-hmm.
Immediately. Like, right away. Return of the Jedi comes out, and then people are like, oh, Return of the Jedi comes out in what, 83?
Probably 4 or 5, because they come out like every 3-ish years. Or yeah, so I guess like 83 or 84. Something like that.
Yeah, and right away it's declared the best Star Wars movie. And I believe we're already getting like expanded universe stuff, because I think Splinter of the Mind's Eye comes out in 79 or 77.
They are definitely making
79 or 78.
They're making novels. Comic books are probably on the horizon.
Yeah, so and granted, I think back then people were already like, yo, we're getting Star Wars 2. Is this going to be a shit movie? Like, think about it, because there weren't good sequels aplenty to pick from back then. Like, you had Godfather Part 2, and that was it in terms of good sequels.
Yeah, I mean, sequels at this point, like, the sequel problem doesn't exist a terrible bunch. A lot of times sequels do end up becoming B movies and or are solely for the purpose of commercialization. This has to be one of the first instances, though, in which studio and producerial and directorial minds are coming together to make this like continuation of the series really happen. Like, it's not just about putting more asses in seats and here's the problem but worse. But I feel like maybe aside from things like James Bond or I don't know what franchise would have existed before that, but like this is kind of like one of the first times that we see a sequel and it's like, oh, you can make the story continue in a good way.
Maybe. I mean, okay, because the original Star Wars, I'm gonna admit, in terms of like Star Wars movies, I'm a New Hope guy. I love the original Star Wars.
Yeah, it's classic.
Yeah, and I feel that's like a really good, like, great movie, because it's all one contained story, and at the end of it they blow up the Death Star. That's, we win, the thing, we all get crowned with medals and accolades, hurrah. And then with Empire, don't get me wrong, I understand that it's a continuation of the story of the rebellion versus the Empire, but it almost feels like George Lucas was like, I only had enough material for one movie.
Oh,
And now I'm like, I'm forced to expand on something I didn't actually have that much depth in before. Cuz I don't think anybody's going to be surprised that George Lucas kind of winged a lot of Star Wars canon
yeah.
as it went on.
I mean, when you base the creation of a movie off a bet, it's kind of going to follow that you're not going to be able to be the sole mind behind it forever. And thankfully he's not in this movie. I think somebody else ends up directing it.
Uh oh god, I know somebody, yeah, no, somebody else directed this. George Lucas is
Irvin
just on as a
Kershner.
producer. Yeah, Irvin Kershner. George Lucas is only on by like story and producer credit.
Yeah. So, and which is fair, story by means he probably wrote the treatment of sorts or something. But all that aside, it's like, I still think that far and away, all of the expansions they do in this film are perfect segues from the first one. I mean, how are you going to take the Luke Vader thing and make it even more? I mean, there's a lot of ways you could, because technically in the first film they barely meet. The protagonist antagonist thing going on between them technically isn't even really between them. It's more between Ben Kenobi and Darth Vader. They're the ones who actually have the fight in the first movie, of which, by the way, is another thing that they expand upon in this movie that makes it even better. Again, a lot of love for New Hope, but that Star Wars staple is the lightsaber fight. And the lightsaber fight in the first movie is primitive.
Yeah. I think that's okay. Have you ever heard the argument for the pros and cons of every trilogy?
Yeah.
So, like, the original trilogy has the best story and the worst action, and the prequel trilogy has the worst story but the best action, and the new trilogy has the best acting but the worst story.
That's an interesting. I haven't heard the new. I've always heard that, or it was based in my opinion that, at the very least, yeah, the original trilogy had the best story. The prequel trilogy has the best lightsaber choreography.
It has the best action.
Yeah, overall, and then, like, the new trilogy, I would put it out there that it. I guess it has pretty good acting, because a lot of moments I remember from the new trilogy that I like do have to do with, like, performance, I guess. But yes, go on with this theory, Dean.
Well, I mean, the theory I've been having with that is, like, the original, like, Empire Strikes Back, and I guess the original trilogy, because we're kind of talking about these movies in context of their canon or their franchise.
Yeah.
With Empire, when you note that, yeah, the lightsaber battles in Star Wars, it's not that good. But in Empire, they do try and step it up, but it's still very obvious that David Prowse cannot see dick out of that Darth Vader costume.
Practically, yeah. And at the very least, what they do in that scene is really play a lot more around with, like, silhouetting and lighting and kind of the atmosphere of the scenes in which they are having these fights in.
Mm-hmm.
As well as, in my opinion, though the effects don't age well in that moment, the being sucked into a cavernous hole and then ejected out into the harsh nothingness of Bespin is, in my opinion, one of the best symbolic moments in all of Star Wars. Because it's like, think about it. You get the pivotal piece of information in pretty much the whole franchise. It's the one that's A, the most quotable, and probably B, the most dramatic. Because I would also venture to say Luke's reaction to it is, I think, the best acting in all of Star Wars. Because it's so devastated and hurt, and the makeup and the wind effects. And then the fall into it just perfectly encapsulates that idea that you are the spawn of the most evil thing in the universe.
It is a great scene. And I think that's something I can't take away from Empire is that twist at the end is definitely like the greatest part of the original trilogy.
Yeah.
Because it is a downer moment, and it works really well in that character. It works really well with both of them. Granted, it's also a little, I keep going back to the fact that because in like the original Star Wars it's not hinted at all,
Mm-hmm.
which is kind of fascinating. But it also, later we find out that Leia basically macked on her brother to make Han jealous. A little also confusing. Yeah.
But I think that's what makes that moment even more funny upon rewatching it. Because in reality, they don't know. So it's like, it could happen. And yeah, it's just kind of an awkward moment. Yeah, like now we know that they're brother and sister. It is a little weird. But, you know, they don't know yet. So it's like, it's chalk it up to just an awkward moment. Especially because
hashtag cringe.
It's more in spite. I mean, obviously, that scene is more
Yeah.
about her trying to get back at Han. And I think that's another reason that this is one of the best, is this is some of the best Leia and Han conflict that we ever get.
Honestly, I actually have a question about that. So, do you think Han and Leia's relationship makes sense? Because I know because the original Star Wars, they have like, they're not really romantic in the original Star Wars, A New Hope, are they? I'm gonna prefix, I haven't seen A New Hope in a minute.
The only moments I can really think of is there's a little bit of kind of this, the criminal and the regal going at each other's throats in scenes like the garbage compactor scene, right? I think they do go at each other's throats in that and others, as well as I think they do kind of share a little bit of a moment at the end of A New Hope, like during the ceremony. I think they give each other kind of that look. Of course, it could be like retroactive, kind of thinking about it that way, rather than just a "we did it" moment. But they do kind of set it up perfectly in this new one, where, you know, Luke's been kind of enveloped in his work as a Jedi, or whatever that entails up to this point, and then they've been kind of left to, as he says, spend some time on the sunsets of Hoth or whatever they're doing.
Yeah. What is Luke doing on Hoth anyway?
Well,
where he's riding out with a tauntaun. What's he doing with that?
That's like a scouting mission, I think, is what's happening. And then he gets attacked by the monster, obviously. But it kind of they're high-ranking officials in the Rebel Alliance at this point. There's Han is some sort of high-ranking pilot because of his piloting skills and awards from the previous movie. Luke, being the only surviving Jedi in the Rebel Alliance, obviously gets a little bit of a bump in that way, as well as his achievements. And Leia probably has something to do with them being recognized as such, because she's a general herself. I don't know why they would be doing... This is one thing I've always wondered. I don't know why they would be doing the scrub work of scouting the outskirts of the base. Especially when we think about it, if the Empire can send out drones of sorts, I feel like the Rebel Alliance could. But it could go back to the desperate situation that they're in, even though they have a literal nuclear reactor on site.
Yeah. It is fascinating, all right, with Empire and the world building and all that stuff. Because that's a lot of what Empire Strikes Back is like the world building aspect. Because, again, I think we can both agree Lucas had no idea that Star Wars was gonna blow up like it did. And we're pretty sure he also had no idea how much deeper he would have to make the world for it to continue on.
And nor do I think he, like, you kind of, to your point, he doesn't have the chops to do it.
Not really. I mean, don't get me wrong, he was good enough. He made the original Star Wars, and there's stuff going on there. But, like, it then took him, like, 30 years to make The Phantom Menace. And we know how that turned out. So my thinking is he makes like Empire Strikes Back really feels like the lore movie or the world building film,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we're nerds. We watched movies that are legitimately only exist to expand the universe. This it kind of feels like that to me. We're following the main characters, Luke, Han, Leia, but it's feels a lot more like Han and Leia are traveling to all these different locations to expand the physical world. They travel to Bespin, they travel to like that worm rock thing, they travel through space. And Luke is expanding the Jedi lore a little bit. He meets Yoda. There's all the stuff going on with like the Force, what it can actually do, how it's a lot more mystical than we originally thought. And then we have the whole expansion of the plot with Luke, I am your father, and the Darth Vader thing. I think that's my thing with Empire. It feels a lot more like world interested in building the world for the rest of the franchise than really telling a deep story. Like, how deep do you think Empire is?
Well, my opinion about the story kind of extends from something like it's not a fulfilling end on a high note story that we get in like the hero's journey of A New Hope or technically Return of the Jedi or something. I think what it does well is set a blueprint for how, if you're going to make a trilogy, the second movie should go in any trilogy, in that it should be almost like a flipping of the script. And just as we had the hero's journey to start out any of these trilogies, we now have this like crisis of confidence story in the second half or the second third of any of these sagas, because that's what the movie is. It's taking this idea that the nobody can come off the desolate rock he was born on to become this galactic pilot with special powers. But now he's learning the truth of those powers and even the origins of those powers, which are of his greatest fears, which complicate the problems to the point where he will have to overcome, again, kind of the theme of the whole series being about basically just good versus evil, white hat versus black hat. He will have to overcome the temptation of evil in order to find out what it truly means to be good as a Jedi. So I think I've always thought that was one of my favorite parts about Empire, is it's not afraid to give the characters something tough to think about even at the end of the film. And that's what we are left with. A pretty, for probably 1982 or whatever,
1980.
Or yeah, a pretty gruesome sight of a guy with his hand cut off, dangling in the atmosphere of a desolate world. I mean, it's a pretty low downer moment.
Yeah, and I think I give credit to that because that's very New Hollywood, is the downer ending.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, the original Star Wars, don't get me wrong, follows the hero's journey. It's a very good, tight film, but it's weird because that's really like the first blockbuster. I know Jaws is considered the first blockbuster film, but Star Wars is the blockbuster to end all blockbusters.
Yeah, it's kind of like that time-tested thing where one does the original and then somebody else copies the marketing plan and they do it even better.
Yeah. So it's just interesting. I think Empire is a movie made up of a lot of good moments, but I think as a whole it's a very strange film. Am I off on that?
No.
Would you agree that its moments are better than its whole?
In personal opinion, no, but yeah, probably overall, objectively, yes. There are moments in this film that are some of the most quotable of the Star Wars franchise that, if you go back to it, people are like, I'm sure for most casual fans, and again, it hurts to actually use that phrase, The Empire Strikes Back is probably not their favorite movie. You probably are a fairly well-versed / diehard fan if Empire is really your favorite movie, because there's probably some semblance of you that has been hurt by divorce or a breakup that makes you crave that darkness.
I mean, we have a mutual friend who is a diehard Star Wars fan, Return of the Jedi is one, or not Return, Empire is one of his favorite movies, and he's on the side of the Empire.
Yeah.
Which I feel is just him being a contrarian.
Yeah.
When he's like, he's like, Palpatine's my favorite character, the Empire is the good guys, and I'm like...
And Palpatine shows up, like,
just
once.
Yeah, throughout the whole fucking movie. And I'm like, you're just being a contrarian. But yeah.
I will say, I love the original iteration of Palpatine in this film rather than the like new remastered version. A lot scarier, in my opinion.
That's another thing I wanted to mention. So, the special editions of Star Wars and Empire and Return of the Jedi, where Lucas went back and changed a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
So I have the original Star Wars franchise on VHS. Like, the only way you can watch them legally without having to get like a bootleg demastered cut.
Yeah.
But like, do you think it's weird when you see like early 2000s visual effects in Empire? Because I'm just saying, I kind of laughed when Luke did the whole Jedi jump from below the pit, and it was just this thing. It was just this weird flash of Luke flying in the air for like a split second. And I'm like, what the fuck is that? That's so fucking weird. I just wanted to know, did that take you out of the movie at all?
Listen, there are certainly parts of this that they show through. And I think both these movies have that to certain extents. Thankfully, what I think Star Wars makes up for and what it lacks is that it has mastered certain things like laser effects and all those, or let alone the sound design of these movies. Because it's a pretty golden rule in Hollywood that if you have good sound, that's what's most important.
Well, if you having good sound makes your movie better, having bad sound makes your movie unwatchable.
Yeah. So there are certain things that age poorly, but we look past them fondly, I think.
Yes.
And or they've just been completely remastered out because Lucas can't just let things
leave well enough alone.
Yeah.
You know something crazy I found out? So the original Star Wars is in the Library of Congress, right? For like film preservation and all that stuff. And to do it, they get a 35mm original print of the movie. And every movie in the Library of Congress is like that. They have an original theatrical release except of Star Wars. Because Lucas said does not exist an original negative of Star Wars. So he gave them a work print that had all the special edition shit.
That's so sad.
So if we have a global apocalypse and Library of Congress has to, repopulate media, I don't know how that would happen, but no one would be able to see the original Star Wars as seen in theaters. Ruins me.
Vanity ruins the best of us.
Yes. And Empire. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think it might just be the thing where I'm just not that big of a Star Wars guy. I like the original one, but they've never been my go-to, I guess.
Oh, Dean. Dean.
My girlfriend says the same thing. She's like, you just hate fun. And I'm like, no, I don't.
Well, I would have to agree because the next movie we're going to talk about is devoid of any fun.
Oh, you piece of shit.
Well, we'll get into all the thick of that in a moment when we get to Wrath of Khan. Right after this. Dean, I found a great way for us to do something cool and to make a little money on the side.
Great. I've been looking for a new place to put my money. What do you got?
No investment needed. In fact, it's super easy, and there's creation tools we can use to record our podcast right from the phone or computer.
Wait, why would you record a podcast on your phone? You want? No, never mind. Where do I put my money for this?
I don't need any of your money. We can even get our podcast distributed to big streaming platforms like Spotify and Google Podcasts.
Oh, I get it now. We're talking big business here, okay? So you're going to need a lot of money from me. How much money are we talking here?
No, definitely don't need any of your money. In fact, we can make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership.
Okay. Now I think I'm getting what you're going at here. We need to spend money to make money. So we're talking some big gains here. Big gains.
No, definitely no. I don't need any of your money. Just all we need to make a podcast right in one place.
Okay. So what you're telling me is that you're gonna need a pretty big check from me for this podcast. So do I just make it out to cash? Because it's no problem for me. I'll just write it up right now.
No, listen, Dean, just head over to anchor.fm and check it out. You'll see why Anchor is the best place for us to record, edit, and distribute our podcasts. And I definitely do not need any of your money.
Shut up and take my money. Space, the final frontier. These the stories of the Starship Enterprise on its 5-year journey to go where no man has gone before. Oh yeah, we're talking about Wrath of Khan. I'm very excited.
Oh, God.
I'm so excited. I started rewatching the original series after this movie. This movie is fucking awesome. David, how are you doing?
Just
feeling. Do you just not get it? Do you just not get why I like this movie, or what?
Okay. I mentioned this at the top of the show, right? I'm a Star Wars guy. Star Trek is, again, there's a clear rivalry between the two for superficial reasons, but at the end of the day, I do think they're totally different franchises for totally different fans. And
yeah,
just as much as I like all the shit that all the people who like Star Wars like, it's the exact reason I just am not. I've never been able to get into Star Trek.
I can understand that, yeah, because you know how people describe Star Wars as a space fantasy,
yeah,
because it's wizards and knights and things like that. People describe Star Trek as a space western, because they're the lawmen who go onto these planets, set things right, fight the villain of the week and move on.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the original show here, or like the television series, because they're serialized. The movies are a little bit different.
Yeah.
The movies, yeah.
That's, I guess, the first thing I noticed as a non-Star Trekkie is I could probably get down with the show because the way that it is, again, serialized and shorter. and probably a little bit more bite-sizable. Especially, again, I mentioned this, a younger cast. But that's neither here nor there. I think also Star Trek is just like a clear sign of a specific time that the original show was on in like the 60s, right?
67 to 69?
Yeah. That is such like a specific zeitgeist and cultural time in which that looked a certain way because it was in the 60s. That I look at the updated version in now 1982, I believe this is when the movie takes place.
This takes place in 82.
And I'm like, I don't know if it's the same. I there's some good visuals throughout this, but there's also some things about Star Trek and the way it was originally designed that exist in this time where I'm like, this is just kind of getting... I don't want to disparage it, off color, but it's fucking nerdy.
Yeah, look, dog, if I'm being real with you, Star Trek is super fucking nerdy, all right? And I'm proud of that, okay?
Yeah.
Because, Star Trek is... Because it was originally designed to be all right, I'm going to put the largest air quotes in human history on this. Designed to be realistic depictions of humans in space.
Yeah.
Air quotes, ginormous in terms of realistic. Because it was supposed to be a more or less accurate showing of what humanity would look like in space. They were traveling to all these different things and aliens existed and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And that was the whole concept of the show. And a lot of people really dug it. But the original show is just a veil to do like social commentary of the time. I mean, Star Trek is the first television show to have the first interracial kiss ever.
Right.
And not like on American television, in like world cinema.
Oh yeah.
Or in like world of television. And they also had episodes that dealt with like war culture, about racism, about sexism, feminism. The original series was basically the Twilight Zone, except it had a consistent cast.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest. And the movies, because it ain't no surprise, the series was ended in 1969. The first movie, Star Trek the Motion Picture, came out in 1979. There's a 10-year gap in between that before the series got quote unquote revived, and this came out in 1982. The cast is, all of them are in like their 40s to 50s.
Yeah.
I think yeah, William Shatner is like 50 years old in this movie.
Yeah.
And I think that works out kind of well, given the theme is growing old, kind of losing, your youth, things like that.
Holy crap, that means William Shatner's 90 years old?
William Shatner's 90 years old, yes.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, William Shatner is 90 years old this year. I think right now he's the oldest surviving member of Star Trek. The oldest original member was DeForest Kelley, Bones McCoy, who I think if he was still alive, he'd be either 98 or like 102. He would have been very old, but he passed away in like the 90s. Or no, he passed away in like the early 2000s.
I didn't even think about this, although it makes sense now that I said it out loud. And I gotta say, William Shatner doesn't look a day over 88. I mean, he is.
Yeah. Okay. Look,
wow.
You can talk a lot of shit about William Shatner, but the man's 90 years old and he still is doing shit.
Yeah.
Well, he's still doing shit, which is fascinating.
Yeah. He's Priceline negotiator, bro. One of the most pivotal roles in commercial history.
Exactly. He's been the Priceline representative for like 2 decades.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. You want to know another crazy thing? Yeah. Out of the original like 6 leading characters of Star Trek, the original 7, only 3 of them have passed away. The rest of them are still alive. They're all in like their 80s and 90s, but the rest of them are still alive, which is fascinating.
Hey, you know, being good people makes you age well. That's all I gotta say.
Exactly. Long live and prosper. That's all I gotta say. Slid in one reference into this segment. But yeah, so Wrath of Khan.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I love this movie. This movie's fantastic. The whole preface is that, Chekhov, now that he's on this new ship, goes down to this planet that he feels that they believe is abandoned, and they're checking it for indigenous life so they can launch the Genesis Project, which in theory, if it does work, will be able to revitalize dead planets, create new ecosystems, and basically terraform a planet in minutes instead of, centuries. And there, it is not abandoned, but Khan is there, and now that he has a way off the planet, he uses brain slugs to mind control Chekhov and the captain. Don't worry about it. To infiltrate the ship and take over with his band of genetically engineered spawn.
Yeah.
To, seek revenge on Admiral Kirk and the crew of the Starship Enterprise. And then hilarity ensues.
Hilarity,
wonderful.
Indeed. Because I got comments, questions, and feedback, as I would say.
You know what? Go for it. Because I think I can help.
So we start the movie off in like the first scene. I'm chilling with. I can dig what's going on at the onset of things. We are dealing with a new crew on the Enterprise that is undergoing a training simulation that is one of the toughest to do in the Academy. But of course, this new captain that should be taking over things, Saavik, who is, I guess, a apprentice of Spock.
She is the first mate of... Well, Spock is like the acting captain of the Starship Enterprise, and he's like training the next crew to basically take over. Right.
So I think it's a good opener where there's something going on. There's the kind of twist that reveals the point of the movie. This person will have to eventually learn what it takes in order to become the new leader of this crew. But, okay, the movie, I think, doesn't really address that terribly well. In that, from the whole rest of the movie on, I'm thinking, okay, Kirstie Alley's going to be doing some shit in this movie that's going to impress me and make me believe that she could captain a ship in the depths of space. Doesn't do a whole lot. Doesn't do a whole hell of a lot in the rest of the movie because 50-year-old Captain Kirk, Admiral Kirk, has to go around flapping his wrinkly ass all over the universe just to fight this other old guy.
Okay. First of all, it's called the Kobayashi Maru.
Right.
Thank you.
The Kobe beef, whatever it is.
Yeah, the Kobe beef. And it is... Yeah, so the Savick character, I feel, is really just there as a... Yeah, it is weird because, you know, in terms of, like, filmic language, the first character we see and really attach to is supposed to be the main character. And we don't see Kirk for, like, 20 minutes into the movie-ish, right?
I think it's a little earlier than that because he comes out and, like, and gives the whole...
And does his spiel, yeah.
But which makes sense, too. It's not a bad spiel or anything.
Yeah. And granted, Savick is a character that does kind of not do a whole hell of a lot other than... I mean, she learns from Captain Kirk throughout the film of this is how he's approached being a captain. He's this aged individual who was once, you know, the prize of Starfleet. He's an admiral now, but like Sherlock Holmes, when you lose the weekly cases, you grow old and dull and you kind of lose that spark. And this whole thing is, I can't believe I'm saying this, this whole movie is the Captain Kirk getting his groove back, basically. But I still think it works really well with Savick because she learns through Kirk that being a captain is more than rules and regulation. Sometimes you gotta be the scoundrel. You gotta kind of just go with your gut. Sometimes you have to lie. Sometimes you just have to think outside of the box because she's a Vulcan. And Vulcans think cold logic. That is the only way to live life. And
sometimes you have to take notes while I do all the work. It's, you know, that's...
Yeah,
she may as well have been given a notepad, is my opinion. I think they just could have had her do more. And, like, because the setup, and maybe this is, again, in spoiled 2021... where we've gone through every iteration practically of transforming this trope. It's just one of those things where I was sitting there and I'm like, okay, I think the story, especially in the following scenes when we start to talk about, you know, it's his birthday and he's aging and he's out of commission, but he wants to get back into it, but there's something pulling at him that knows he can't. The whole expectation is especially with the insinuation thematically at the beginning, that he will have to learn how to deal with the end of his career. But by and large, he's, again, the one who has to put things in action. Whereas I'm like, where's the drama of Captain Kirk either learning he doesn't have it anymore, or learning he does have it, but he physically can't compete anymore? I don't know. It's just I feel like they could have given him more of an obstacle in that way.
Well, that kind of comes down to, because that's a lot of what this movie is. It foreshadows, you know, the whole thing with, like, the theme going on with Kirk and Savick and Spock to an extent is growing old, aging, and dying. Yeah. Because Kirk knows he can't be Captain Kirk forever. And he knows he's going to have to give it on, but it's the thing where he wants that last ride. He doesn't want to go out behind a desk. Yeah. Basically. And I'm not saying he has a death wish. He doesn't. He just wants that thrill of exploration, of being the captain again. And he gets that through the film, but he then understands that the cost of that is he's not as sharp as he once was, and it's going to lead to tragedy. Yeah. Which is, you know, spoiling the film, is the death of Spock, his best friend, you know. I shall now and forever will be your friend. Spock has to sacrifice himself to save the crew because the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few. Yeah. And Kirk is destroyed by that. You know, Spock gave himself up, and Kirk's like, I don't believe the no-win scenario, but I still feel like I lost here. He lost his best friend.
Yeah,
And it's a fascinating character arc.
but
At the end
I
of the
think
movie.
I think
Come on.
for me, again, going off the setup versus the payoff, it just deals with two different things. Where ideally, because of the setup, I feel like Kirk should have been the one to make that sacrifice. In which case,
Look.
I
I
one
understand
could
this
be
is fiction.
Kirk is the one to make the sacrifice.
I understand this is fiction, but William Shatner ain't laying down for nobody. Let's be honest here. He is the Hulk Hogan of television.
Yeah,
He don't lay down for fucking nobody.
he will literally die in the ring. I know.
Yeah.
Whenever that is, because who knows when Hulk Hogan's even gonna age to the point of death.
Fucking never, dude. God damn it. As long as there is male enhancement drugs and steroids, that man will live on till the end of the earth.
And as long as there are vacations to price negotiate, William Shatner will be somewhere.
But yeah, so, and that's like a fascinating thing about the character, right? About like Spock and Kirk and all that stuff, is the movie deals with that kind of theme. Granted, it might be a little shaky, but it does deal with it.
Yeah.
And the other big thing is coming from Khan, the one of the best villains in science fiction. Just saying. Because he's, you know, out on his quest for revenge. He literally quotes Moby Dick, Paradise Lost, as he's like questing to get, you know, his fucking vengeance.
Yeah.
And he's a great character because he's completely justified. Right? He, granted, he's a character from the original series who, granted, still played by Ricardo Montalban. He came back for this.
Okay.
And he's, you know, brought in, he's like, oh, you stranded me on this desert planet, which led to the death of my wife. You left me here to die because this planet went from a lush paradise to utter destruction. I've basically lived alone, waiting to get back at you, Kirk, for these years. Like that, it's fascinating because he is the Count of Monte Cristo. He is Captain Ahab, and every Shakespearean villain on a quest for revenge, all rolled up to one. And Ricardo Montalban's fantastic in this movie.
And Ricardo Montalban overall is pretty fantastic. I'll give him that. He himself is a good actor. It's just like, okay, here's what I think. I think at the end of the day, the reason why I personally don't find Khan to be the most dastardly villain in all the universe. What you say about all this like Shakespearean stuff, that is probably true. Like objectively, I see how dramatically he has a bone to pick. But it kind of goes back to this whole, that first moment we see him and we see him do something evil, quote unquote, and it's just space slugs. Like it's one thing when the effects of a movie don't age well. It's a whole nother thing when the plot of a movie, in my opinion, doesn't age well. And I think that's what I'm getting is, whereas in 1982, that might have seemed dastardly because we had barely seen things like Gremlins on screen or slasher movies or anything evil, truly. At the other point, there's a part of me that's just like, I don't know, man. I feel like there's something more evil to be done. Like,
well, it's something evil that serves a purpose because it's because the brain slug that he, you know, puts into Chekhov's ear and the new captain's ear is, you know, basically sentencing them to death. It's one of those things where it breaks down their inhibitions. Basically, he's roofing them.
Yeah.
Breaks down their inhibitions. They're going to be way more pliable. He can order them to do basically whatever he wants. But at the end, once the slug kind of does its duty, it's going to kill them. They're going to die. And it's, you know, fascinating because he uses that to get aboard the new ship and take over because he's far more ruthless than the Starfleet is.
Maybe, yeah, I don't know. I think it just comes down to, like, for me, the space slug thing doesn't even pay off for an hour. Like, it's not for an hour until we see that the captain and Chekhov, the worms actually do something to them to the point at which one of them has to kill themselves, which is probably the real horrific part of that. They probably could have found a way to make that happen earlier and make me care a little bit more. It's to this point of like, it almost felt a little bit just like plot for convenience. Like we have to find a way to get Khan off the planet and to use these guys to do that. Well, space slug that can control minds. There you go. Which is like, there's a lot of shit that exists like that, don't get me wrong, but I don't know. It just felt a little like, yeah, I guess a space slug that can control minds. It could have been anything at that point.
I mean, it's granted, it is a little bit sci-fi for sci-fi's sake, but I think it works. I mean, for God's sakes, the other movie we talked about had fucking flying wizards.
Let me pose this for like a suggestion, if we will say. This is my feedback portion of the questionnaire.
Yeah.
And this goes back to not even, because I feel like part of it too just comes down to like effects and shit, where they literally probably couldn't have done much more to make him seem either more physically strong, more physically evil, more blah 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 blah, whatever. But they could have at least administered whatever is going to control their minds in a more dastardly way than letting a slug crawl into the air. Like, let me put this one out there. What if it's a whole thing where this last life form on the Earth isn't like a slug per se, but like a snake of sorts, where it's literally like a rattlesnake that bites and drills venom into their veins that becomes addictive. So the mind control isn't even like mind control for mind control's sake. It's literally that they are at the bidding of Khan, because without the venom, which feels like an opiate to them, they will go crazy and die. So then there's even like a stake for the characters have to make the choice to obey him. They aren't just like obeying him for whatever.
That's actually a fascinating thing. I kind of like that. That is a fascinating like bit of critique there.
Yeah, because that's what I mean.
I was still like the brain slug.
But like, you know, that's kind of what I go back to is like Ricardo is he has everything with this Khan character to be that dastardly. It's just like the space slug is the first impression. That and everything afterward, I get for the most part is pretty good. Like him taking over the ship and then getting into the space battle is like, okay, that's where we start to get some real.
You mean when he tortures and murders all the scientists on the Genesis, like space station
off screen,
and he just leaves them hanging up there like cattle
off screen. Which is, I get, it's the whole thing where it's like you don't want to reveal the monster, but I don't know. It's just like, come on, man. I need to see what this guy's evil is, not just hear about it.
I guess. But yeah, I know it's like, okay, because Wrath of Khan, you know, we can agree at least that you might not, we can agree that we get the characters, right? We understand Kirk's motivations, we understand Khan's motivations, we understand the motivations of the characters, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have the story that plays out with Genesis, with Spock, with Kirk, with Khan, and all the stuff that happens within the film. Because the story of this is so much fun, right? Am I wrong saying that this is a fun movie? Because it is. It's incredibly fun.
You don't want to ask me that question.
Why do you hate? Okay, I gotta know because is it just a thing where I love a movie that's bad, or do you just not like a movie that's good?
Listen, there are plenty of people who do like this movie, so it's not even coming down to like I'm saying objectively it's not fun. There's again, it kind of comes back to personal taste where you enjoy, I feel like, a lot of what goes into this whole epicness of the movie, whereas I, not being a Star Trek fan, that's not just what's going to do it for me. You know, I'm waiting to see like all of kind of, I guess, opposite of that, this action in a space opera that makes it that kind of spectacle. It's just a different reason to go to a theater, but it's also in things that, like, because of that, I'm not as interested in all of like the slower action that goes on. I mean, you got to admit, even the spaceships move slower in this movie, or even the laser guns move slower in this movie and with less effect than a laser in Star Wars. Which is, it just comes down to the fact that I like that kind of faster paced, more chaotic thing albeit then there's not as much of a, although Empire still has a pretty good story, yeah, there's not as much of a complicated plot and story and theme to what's going on here.
I mean, okay. Because we talked a lot about the downer ending of Empire, right? You know,
and we do get
which
we do get that here.
Yes, come on, like you can't tell me you didn't get a little choked up when Kirk was saying, you know, I've seen many souls in my travels, but his was the most human. When he's giving the eulogy to Spock as they launch him into space.
And then there's the Scottish
the bagpipes.
Which was kind of like, really? What year is this? We're still on that?
Scotty, well, Scotty is Scottish, so that's like the thing.
Yeah.
But come on, that's an emotional moment. Unironically, I was looking on Reddit, I don't know, a couple of weeks ago, and it was one of those movie threads about moments in cinema that make you cry every time. And I think it was number 2 or 3 on that list of like the voting or whatever, or that thread was Spock's funeral from Wrath of Khan. Right? It's like Iron Giant Superman and Spock's death, Wrath of Khan. And also Rose losing Jack in Titanic.
Oh my god.
So I don't know. Is Reddit wrong? Yeah,
because I think it also comes down to two, like, I have no emotional connection to this series, so no, I didn't cry. But yeah, I get how
I didn't either. I mean, I'm
like,
a grown ass man, but whatever.
Even the cultural listen, Dean, it's okay to admit when you cry.
I didn't. I know. I admitted I cried during Iron Giant. I didn't cry during Wrath of Khan.
Hey, right? I cry at Revenge of the Sith. I mean, it's all a different thing.
You would cry at the end of Revenge of the Sith?
No, not really. But it's one of the best endings to any movie ever. But all that aside, you know, I think it really does come down to maybe this is a moment where we learn there has to be an emotional involvement for those emotional peaks to happen in movies. And for fans of the franchise, yeah, this is probably one of the saddest things they can conceive of is the death of Spock, which he then, I believe, goes on to get resurrected at some point.
Yeah, so the next movie after this, Star Trek 3, is called Star Trek Search for Spock.
Yeah.
Where they literally, because, you know when Spock does the Vulcan nerve pins to Bones so he can get into the radiation lab to save the thing? And he does that hand thing on Bones' face right before it cuts? That is called the Vulcan Mind Meld, where Spock's left a essence of his like quote unquote soul or his like mind or whatever embedded into Bones, so they could use that to revive him in the next movie. Don't worry about it. Movies are weird. I mean, but Wrath of Khan is fine.
Yeah, we can't really listen. Us in the Star Wars camp can't really complain because we literally see the Empire come back from no reason at all. Not even there's not even a Vulcan mind meld that's fully explained at all.
I mean, Force ghosts exist, so
Force ghosts do exist, but does that explain a whole cloning contraption that somehow makes the Emperor come back to life? I don't know. It's a whole can of worms that we could probably get into a whole 50-episode series on its own.
Yeah, that's the next sequel to this podcast, is where we just go through all the weird shit in Star Wars and Star Trek.
Yeah,
and we just stack them up next to each other.
But all you can really chalk it down to, I guess, to kind of wrap it back to both of these, is it's just desperate attempts at a studio to continue cashing in on your nerdy asses. Your wallets are full of money, and they're ready to get you to go, you know, may the force be with you, here's $20, over and over and over
Live
again.
long and prosper, give us your money.
Yeah, live long and insert your chip into the card reader.
Fucking truth, dog.
Yeah.
I guess, okay, because I know we didn't really talk about like the movies a lot more than we were both arguing as to why our movie wasn't shit.
Yeah.
But like, because I think that's an interesting thing, right? You know, we'll just get into like the little wrap up this, because we these movies need to be talked about in a little bit more context. So David, give me one good thing and one bad thing about Empire and Wrath of Khan.
Okay. About Empire. I think that the action sequences are a positive because they are much more creative and even more epic in this one. Whereas, yeah, the first Death Star space battle was iconic in certain ways. The first like that battle on Hoth to open that movie is just unlike anything you've ever seen on screen, and it results in this like epic energy boost that gets you hooked up for what, yeah, might be kind of some slow parts of the movie in which we start to learn more about the lore of the universe and how that affects the main character. Which then you could like kind of to your point, Dean, I can see how that is a negative in the movie, in which a large portion of the movie is based on learning, which isn't great. And it's at least saved a little bit by some intercutting, some kind of delving into the crime world that we have in Star Wars, delving into the backstories of these characters, and certain other things that help. But yeah, at the end of the day, if that's like a large portion of what you need to base your movie on, it's probably not the best. Now, opposite this, Star Trek. I'll start with my negative. In that, if there was one or the other that is probably easier to get into in the second film, it's probably Star Wars. Wrath of Khan, as somebody, again, I have not seen any other Star Trek movies, was a little bit, past that opening, a little dense for me to understand. Because there was a lot of talking, which was a lot of exposition, which is a lot of yada, yada, yada. And then it results in, like, there are large portions of the movie that, again, are just dialogue versus action. Opposite of that, though, I will give the Star Trek one thing. In that, at the very least, it's willing to take some sort of central premise to the film and base it on that versus Star Wars. Whereas Star Wars, again, mostly is about this one central revelation about the character that is also about these other long-winded revelations that will make it so that we can do a third movie. At the very least, the idea of the Genesis Project made the movie go. And I'm like, okay, now there's a reason for me to understand what's going on here. And I think without that, that would have been lost on me totally. I mean, that was at least, it's kind of like when we go back to a good comparison is Akira. There was something in that that was making it so I could follow this long and complicated story, because it all comes back to this idea that what's going on here is the central of a grand conspiracy that has to do with the spirit of Akira as like a god in the city and all this crap. And the Genesis Project was, there's an idea that they're trying to get on, which kind of goes back to your, I think I can praise, and why I would probably watch the original series of Star Trek, is that we're dealing with these scientific and social questions, and the Genesis Project made the movie at least somewhat a palatable thing for somebody who has never seen it before.
Yeah, and I would, okay, for the Star Wars part, I would agree with you. The action, the adventure, the spectacle of Star Wars is better than Star Trek. That I'll concede that to you. The negative I would have for Star Wars or Empire specifically is that I hate saying this because my girlfriend tells me this when I try to analyze movies, is it's just not that deep, bro. Because it's kind of true, right? Like, Empire is not realistically like that deep of a movie. It's not trying to comment on humanity as a whole, really. It's not trying to, it knows what it is. It's trying to like start a franchise and make George Lucas enough money he never has to work again. And right, am I wrong?
It's what he did.
Yeah,
that's why it's called Skywalker Ranch.
It's true. It's why it's called Lucas Films, Industrial Light and Magic, whatever. And then with Star Trek, yeah. So the negative I would give to Wrath of Khan is that it's very slow and it's a lot harder to get into if you don't have a basis, which is kind of a problem with a lot of movies that are based on television shows or pre-existing characters.
Yeah.
Which we never really got right until the fucking Marvel movies. How are you going to condense 40 years of fucking continuity down into like a 2-hour movie? Well, we figured that out when we made Iron Man. Right?
Yeah.
And Star Trek is 82. They didn't figure that shit out.
Yes.
But the positive I have is it does deal with more stuff than what's on the surface, right? It does deal with, aging, death, rebirth, revenge, with knowing when it's over. Like it deals with a lot of like deeper themes and meanings that I find fascinating to watch. And also, I ain't gonna lie, when you wanted the dastardly moment for Khan as a villain, it's like, I will leave you there on this planet like you left me, you know. That is my true,
Yeah.
thing, and Kirk yells, Khan! Like, that's the best. Okay, I love that shit. I love Ricardo Montalban just talking mad shit on Captain Kirk, like, every time. It's so good.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I will say Ricardo Montalban is always good for a damn good line to read. That's for sure.
And fun fact, there's no prosthetics on that man. Like, he is just that ripped.
Mm-hmm.
Ricardo Montalban was like 60 something when he made this movie, and he is jacked, which is fascinating. William Shatner couldn't be asked. Could not be asked.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I guess the thing here in the wrap up is, if you can only watch one this weekend, what are you gonna watch? And why are we on two opposite sides of this fence and we'll never get off of it?
Yeah, it's going to be Empire Strikes Back because, again, I love the Hoth scene of the final lightsaber fight. I really love Billy D. Williams. I mean, he's just one of the fucking suavest, sexiest guys that will ever grace the screen in the early 80s. I don't know. It's just one of those things where I think for both of us, it will come down to specific childhood likes that we both have for these, and that I think just at the end of the day, if you're looking for something to watch on a weekend, a little bit of adventure is always a little bit better than a little bit of a science textbook as a story.
Wow, fucking savage over here. Look, I'm sitting on Star Trek. I'm sitting on Wrath of Khan. Because yeah, Empire is more big and bombastic and whatnot, but Wrath of Khan just, it feels like a more, like a serious movie where it's like, yeah, we're not gallivanting around blasting down stormtroopers by the score because they can't hit dick. No, we're gonna be like a real movie and talk about stuff.
A lot of stuff
without puppets. Dude,
I'm watching that this time around and seeing Yoda like shaking his cane at R2-D2 I died, bro. That was the best.
You couldn't anymore.
It's my favorite.
Hey, dude, you got to be careful. In certain editions, Yoda's back to being a CGI like caricature. We got to be careful. Lucas is coming to get us all.
Eventually, unfortunately, there's Jeff Bezos and then there's George Lucas.
Mm-hmm. But yeah, I guess that's the thing. The other thing is, like, I feel like Star Trek, if you don't dig Wrath of Khan, there's enough Star Trek to find something you do like. Because, again, there's 7 or 8 television series associated with this. I think there's 10 or 12 movies associated with the franchise. There's enough books to fill a literal library. And comic books and all that stuff. Like, the expanded universe beyond just this movie is vast and deep and is all interconnected. Like, there's literally a thing called the Star Trek Bible that every writer of every episode and movie has to abide by so it all makes sense in universe. I don't know why Star Wars doesn't have that. Who knows? But yeah. And I feel like it's Star Wars, if you don't like Empire, then you're not going to like the rest of it.
That's for sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, I don't think Star Wars gets that diverse as it goes on.
No, it does not. And really, there's a lot more of the upbeat, cheesy moments than there are these kind of negative, deeper moments in this series. But go figure. I mean, hey, who's going to really beat the other at the toy aisle,
Yeah. I think you guys probably have not only won that, you have dunked that into the ground.
Yeah, what was that about lapping that we went over?
Yeah,
earlier?
that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
It is kind of funny.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Well.
so there you go. I mean, is there any other final like closing statements you want to make about these two, or one of them, or any of them that you want to chime into before we do the official wrap up and say what we're doing next week?
Yeah, I mean, I watch Star Wars as a movie series, and I think Star Trek I'll give a shot as a television show eventually. The idea seems much more attractive when it's a serialized analyzation of a bunch of different topics that rather than the 2-hour analyzation of one topic. So, maybe I think there's something to be said about this. And the TV series, I think, are the ones that get a lot more praise anyways.
Yeah, I mean, there is an ongoing joke that only every other Star Trek movie is good.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you know this, but when Star Trek the Motion Picture came out in 1979, it made a shit ton of money, but every critic thought it was total ass.
Well,
yeah, and then Wrath of Khan came out, and it made a lot of money, and critics thought it was the greatest thing since sliced fucking bread. But,
go figure.
Who knows? But yeah, what are we doing next week so we can stop being very angry at each other about movies from our childhood?
Well, who knows when we will stop being angry at each other, Dean. I know that it may not end anytime soon, but we at least next week we'll get to delve into the mind of George Lucas once more, as well as one of our favorite minds we've ever covered on the podcast.
Yes, procrastination.
Yeah, in that of Terry Gilliam. We're going to be diving into 2 dystopian sci-fi films, that of the likes of THX 1138, as well as Brazil.
Yes, both of these movies have a very interesting place in both the directors' careers. THX 1138 was the movie that everyone thought George Lucas was going to be making his whole career, because contrary to popular belief, this guy was the protege of Francis Ford Coppola, and everybody thought he was going to be making these really weird, out there sci-fi art films and not bring about the death of New Hollywood by making all the fucking money. And then we have Brazil, which everyone lauds as Terry Gilliam's greatest work.
But
at least they say it's probably like by far it's either his number 1 or number 2 film ever made.
I would say so, and then it was also the one that he probably had the most trouble making, aside from one recent Who Killed Don Quixote, or The Man Who Killed Don Quixote, that is.
Yeah, which is amazing, because it is fascinating to find out that Terry Gilliam will basically push through any obstacle to get a fucking movie made. It is amazing.
That's Terry Gilliam for you, man.
But yeah, and with that dystopia coming up next week, David, where can they find us?
Well, if you're listening on a podcast app, you could probably subscribe to us there. We are available wherever you can listen to podcasts, including Spotify, Overcast, Radio Public, a bunch of other podcast apps and sites that are listed on our Anchor website. If you go there, anchor.fm, David and Dean Double Feature Picture Show, you will be able to find all of that. We are apparently also on Apple Music, so you can find us there if you like. If you want to also watch this version of the show or look at a pretty picture while listening to it, you can go to our YouTube channel, In the Frame, where we post this along with our kind of hobbyist podcast, Too Obscure for TV, where every now and again we get to something that is a little weird and out there and not going to be available on wide DVD release. As well as our, you know what? I'm going to upgrade it from sister podcast, our partner podcast, if you might say, in which Dean does it with his partner, the Film Club. They do one movie every week, in case you don't like watching 2 nerdy guys complain about 2 movies every week.
Yes, it's just one nerdy guy and his not-so-nerdy girlfriend talking about movies, and I get very angry because no one likes my weird art house picks. They just like her blockbusters.
What a delight. Well, if you want to follow along with us to see anything we're doing, we have an Instagram that would be under @DD_Double Feature Picture Show. We also have a TikTok that is getting somewhere with that just being @Double Feature Picture Show. Go to any of those, give us a follow, and keep up with us in case you liked what you heard this week and any other week. Go listen to the other episodes if you have more time on your hands this weekend. They're There's some great pairings up there that we've done before, and I'm sure we will have another great pairing next week. Dean, I will see you in the future.
Live long and prosper. Peace.
See you.